Welcome to Starbound's second channel. My name is Jack. I'll be your narrator today. Before we start the video, please just go below and check to see if you're subscribed. It's 100% free and it just allows our videos to pop up on your feed more often. Thanks for watching.
Species, human. Classification, fictional entity. Source, multiple convergent mythologies across 12 distinct civilizations. Status, extensively documented imaginary beings.
The automated catalog entry glowed on the wall screens of the specimen analysis chamber, its matter-of-fact declaration a strong contrast to the scorched debris that had just arrived from deep space, telling a different story. The chamber hung suspended in the heart of the Museum of Instinct Civilizations like a perfect hexagonal jewel. Its polished stone floor stretched across 80 feet of space, dark and gleaming like still water, reflecting the precisely arranged track lighting above. The chamber's 30-foot ceiling, supported by 6 titanium columns that seemed to glow with their own inner light, created an impression of vast, controlled space that never failed to inspire a sense of reverence in those privileged enough to work within. Senior researcher Var stood before the central examination table, his massive gold-rimmed eyes rotating independently in their sockets, each capable of a full 180-degree sweep of the room. The patterns of silver-white feathers that framed these eyes had grown distinguished with age, gradually darkening to slate gray at the edges of his face. His small hooked beak, made of dark keratin and marked with age lines and tiny stress fractures, moved slightly as he muttered calculations to himself. 7 decades of sample handling had left deep vertical grooves in the beak's surface, each one a mark of dedication to his field. Beside him, junior analyst Vex presented a striking contrast. His wide, amber-colored eyes, ringed with distinctive black circles around the irises, still maintained the shine of youth and eager curiosity. His facial disc of pure white feathers arranged itself in perfect symmetry, each concentric circle slightly raised to create a dish-like effect that caught and amplified the slightest sound. The sealed containers from the Galactic Archive's Deep Space Recovery Division arrived with little fanfare, labeled as the result of a potential encounter of the galaxy's apex predators, the Ignians, with another unknown force. Var's facial disc feathers developed a deeper furrow of concentration as he approached the first container, his 4 separate eyelids, 2 for blinking, 2 translucent ones for protection, all focusing on the task at hand. "Standard unpacking protocol, Junior Analyst Vex," Var said, his hooked beak moving precisely with each word. "Let's begin with the larger fragments." The next hour passed in the methodical examination. Twisted metal fragments, their edges telling stories of extreme heat and violent forces, charred silicon chips that still held ghost impressions of their original circuitry, whole sections bearing unfamiliar alloy compositions that made the analysis equipment hum in confusion. It was a small box of personal belongings that changed everything. Vex noticed it first, his younger, sharper beak edges catching the light as he leaned forward to examine a metallic disc among the remnants. His feather ears rose in surprise, breaking the professional stillness he had been maintaining. "Professor?" Vex said, his voice carefully modulated despite his excitement. "I believe this is what fictional texts refer to as a dog tag." He held up the disc, its surface marked with unfamiliar characters that seemed to mock everything they thought they knew about galactic history. Var moved to examine a partially melted container nearby, his own discovery equally disturbing. Preserved food items that matched no known civilization's chemical composition. When they found the label, scorched but still clearly showing a sort of insignia and Latin alphabet characters, both researchers fell into a silence heavy with implications that perhaps fiction was more real than they ever imagined. The final item emerged from the debris like a ghost reaching through time, a small personal device, its screen cracked but somehow still displaying a captured image of beings that, according to every official record in the galaxy, had never existed. Beings that had been classified as purely fictional, products of imagination and myth. Humans. Var's worn facial feathers trembled slightly as he stared at the image. 70 years of research, countless papers on the mythology of fictional Earth and its inhabitants, all his careful cataloging of human stories as fascinating examples of convergent narrative evolution across multiple species. All of it stood on the edge of a knife now, threatening to collapse under the weight of these simple personal items that told a story of a living, breathing crew. The implications spiraled outward like ripples in the chamber's still air. These weren't props or replicas. Every analysis confirmed their authenticity, and they had been recovered from a sector the Ignean fleet had always considered safe space, until their devastating defeat there. As Vex began comparing the recovered items with the museum's Earth fiction database entries, his 4 eyelids moving in perfect synchronization, he couldn't help but notice how Var's usually precise movements had become uncertain, almost hesitant. The senior researcher's lifetime of work hung in the balance, along with the museum's entire classification system. The weight of this discovery pressed down on both of them, a suffocating truth that threatened not just Var's lifelong research on human mythology, but their entire civilization's understanding of history. If they were right, they had just discovered that a species had been incorrectly cataloged as fiction. If they were wrong, their careers would bear the scars of this mistake forever. In the pristine, controlled environment of the specimen analysis chamber, surrounded by the soft noise of preservation equipment and the gentle glow of analysis screens, they waited for the final round of analysis to be performed. The best assessment they could get without going on a field trip and getting additional debris. When the mass spectrometer's arrays finished its analysis, capturing their attention, senior researcher Var stood before the chest-high cylinder of brushed metal, his gold-rimmed eyes fixed on the digital readouts that scrolled endlessly across its surface. For the 3rd time in as many hours, he adjusted the calibration settings. "Unknown variant of known metals," he muttered, his worn beak moving in sync with each word. "Simply a previously undocumented alloy composition from an established civilization." But the machine's pitch shifted again, contradicting his desperate rationalization. At the radiometric dating station across the room, Junior Analyst Vex carefully manipulated another artifact through the precision arms. The U-shaped configuration of connected units surrounded the sample like a technical embrace, its shielded observation window offering a clear view of the decay measurement process. He watched the numbers flash across the screen, each digit adding to the growing weight in his stomach. "Professor?" Vex said, his voice steady despite his moving feathered ears. "These dates, they don't align with any known civilization's timeline." Var's facial disk's feathers ruffled slightly. "The Audius likely needs recalibration as well. These artifacts have been exposed to unusual stellar conditions. Perhaps the Ignean defeat involved some form of temporal distortion." The molecular structure scanner activated between them, its flat table-like surface reflecting the overhead lights as its scanning arm began its precise sequence of movements over the latest sample. A holographic model of molecular structures blossomed above the mysterious food container, rotating slowly in the sterile air. "The organic compounds are genuine," Vex announced, his amber eyes reflecting the blue glow of the projection. "The preservation methods are unlike anything in our database, but the material is unquestionably designed for biological consumption. This can only mean that humans are not fiction." Var moved to the MSS, his steps lacking their usual confidence. "The Igneans are known for their psychological warfare tactics. These could be elaborate props, designed to destabilize their enemy with suggestions of impossible civilizations." "With respect, Professor," Vex said, his white facial feathers arranging themselves into their most formal configuration, "that theory doesn't explain the manufacturing techniques. Look at the molecular bonds in these silicon chips. They're not just different from known methods, they're more advanced." The senior researcher's 4 eyelids clicked rapidly, a sign of stress that decades of professional discipline couldn't quite suppress. His facial disc had developed new furrows as the evidence mounted, each discovery adding another crack to the foundation of his life's work. Vex had been documenting everything in a separate data stream, building his case with methodical precision. Each discrepancy, every unexplainable reading, carefully noted and cross-referenced. Now, watching his mentor struggle against the weight of revelation, he chose his next words with diplomatic care. "Perhaps we should consider this an opportunity," he suggested, his facial speckles catching the light as he turned. "If we approach this as verification rather than contradiction..."
"Verification of fiction?" Var's beak clacked sharply. "Should we also launch expeditions to verify every child's tale in the archives?"
The younger researcher moved to the mass spectrometer array, his steps quick and energetic. "The Latin characters on this fabric patch," he said, placing the scorched material into a sample port, "show evidence of standardized manufacturing. The thread count, the dye composition..." He paused as the machine's noise changed pitch again. "Even the wear patterns suggest regular use, not theatrical preparation." Var's feathers dropped slightly as the analysis confirmed yet another impossible truth. The evidence was becoming harder to dismiss, each machine in their pristine laboratory adding its voice to a chorus of contradiction against everything they thought they knew. The final analysis of the dog tags broke the last thread of denial. The MSA's definitive tone echoed through the chamber as it displayed the composition. Metals melted in ways that didn't match any of the known alloys used by any species. Silence filled the room, broken only by the soft whisper of atmospheric regulators and the steady openings of various preservation containers. Both researchers stood in the warm light, surrounded by machines that had just disproved decades of accepted truth. "We need to expose this to the Council," Vex said eventually.
"No, we need to verify this in the field,"
Var said finally, his voice conveying all his denial.
"Quietly, through proper channels."
Vex's feather ears stiffened at the response. The truth would come out, regardless of bureaucracy. Each impossible reading was already documented in his private data stream. 3 work cycles passed in silence. Var processed the expedition request through official channels, each form marked with precise, non-alarming language.
"Standard verification protocol. Routine artifact authentication. Priority level. Moderate."
The bureaucracy responded exactly as he'd intended, with automated approvals and minimal attention. Vex had warmed up to the idea of verification, though in his mind he couldn't see humanity as fiction anymore. When the approval arrived, it came through the same system that processed requests for new specimen cases and replacement atmospheric filters. Just another notification on the lab's daily roster. Authorization for an emergency artifact verification expedition. The bland phrasing masking the weight of their true purpose. The 2 researchers maintained their professional distance. Var focused on equipment requisitions, while Vex completed his preparation checklist, each item marked off with methodical care. They spoke only when necessary, exchanging information in clipped technical terms.
"Transport arrangements confirmed,"
Var announced on the morning of their departure.
"Civilian dock, Section 7B.
Vex nodded, checking the seals on the last sample container. Documentation complete. All artifacts secured. They left the specimen analysis chamber exactly as they'd found it that first day. Sterile, ordered, unchanged. With their samples secured and documented, they made their way through the station's winding corridors toward their transport home. The civilian dock stretched before them, its automated guidance tracks gleaming under banks of specialized pressure lamps. Their research vessel waited in Bay 7B, a modified stellar sciences model with extended sensor arrays and mechanical arms that protruded like delicate spines from its silver-white hull. Each array housed precision instruments capable of detecting molecular variations in space debris. They entered the ship together, took a seat side by side, and buckled up for takeoff. Final systems verification complete, Vex announced, his facial disc feathers arranged in their most professional configuration. The bridge displays responded to his touch, scrolling through environmental readings and navigation coordinates. Their departure clearance came through standard channels. Just another research vessel leaving the museum. The automated traffic control guided them along designated vectors, joining the steady flow of ships moving between the station's massive support struts. The journey was short, and the debris field, supposedly from a battle with a species that shouldn't exist, greeted them with a spreading field of wreckage that stretched across 3 million kilometers. Their detection equipment mapped each fragment's movement, creating a 3-dimensional projection of the destruction pattern. Twisted metal and shattered hull plates turned slowly in the void, recording the final moments of multiple ships. "Beginning systematic analysis," Vex said, adjusting the sensor arrays to detect specific metal compositions. They used the museum samples as baseline readings, searching for matching alloys among the debris. Var operated the collection equipment, its accuracy arms extending through carefully sealed ports to retrieve promising fragments. Each piece underwent immediate testing in the ship's compact analysis bay. Their storage units filled steadily with cataloged samples, each tagged with exact positioning data. Professor?" Vex called out on their 3rd hour of collection. "The mass distribution in Section 47K shows an anomaly." His amber eyes focused on the display where a cluster of debris maintained an unnaturally stable pattern. "The scatter radius suggests intentional placement." The ship's small maneuvering jets fired in controlled bursts, bringing them closer to investigate. The forward sensors revealed an intact structure, too symmetrical for battle debris, too well preserved to ignore.
"The metal composition matches our initial samples,"
Var said, his worn beak moving slightly as he studied the readings.
"Bring it aboard. Whatever this is, it's our best evidence yet."
They cleared 3 specimen tables in the analysis bay, positioning them end to end. The recovery arms guided the object through the pressure-sealed loading port, its surface marked with unfamiliar symbols beneath layers of carbon scoring. Vex initiated their standard scanning sequence. The internal structure... He paused, adjusting the settings. Multiple sealed chambers, reinforced walls. The scanner's next pass froze both researchers mid-motion. A power signature. Faint, but steady, emanated from the object's core. More incredibly, the temperature-regulated central chamber contained...
"A life sign,"
Var whispered, his facial feathers bristling with shock.
"We've brought aboard a living specimen."
The artifact was no mere debris. It was an escape pod. They rushed to the storage bay, and Var's facial disc feathers splayed in shock, all 4 eyelids clicking rapidly as his gold-rimmed eyes locked onto the impossible sight before them. Through its viewport, a human. A living, breathing, human child. Watched them with remarkable composure, given the circumstances. She pressed her face closer to the glass, fogging it with her breath, then awkwardly wiped it clear with her sleeve.
"Impossible,"
Var whispered, his beak clicking softly.
Simply impossible."
The human made a series of gestures, pointing frantically at flashing red indicators inside her pod. She pressed her hands together in what seemed like a pleading motion, then pointed to herself and made a breathing gesture. "Professor," Vex said, already moving to the ship's communication interface. "She's been alone in space for days. I think she's running out of life support." Vex tried to open that hatch, but Var interrupted him.
"Wait. We don't know if she can breathe the same air as us."
Var's worn beak clacked sharply.
"This is a species that shouldn't exist. We should contact the museum first. Arrange proper containment."
The human knocked on the viewport again, drawing their attention back. She mimed checking a wrist device, then made a slashing motion across her throat, her movements becoming more urgent. Vex activated the ship's artificial intelligence with a quick gesture. The wall filled with soft blue light as holographic displays materialized, casting ethereal patterns across their facial feathers. The AI's presence manifested in waves of convoluted data projections, with the pod's environmental readings flowing like water across multiple screens. Warning indicators appeared one after the other, in alarming crimson as it analyzed the pod's failing life support systems. The synthesis of data painted a grim picture. Oxygen levels critically low, barely 17 minutes of breathable atmosphere remaining. The human seemed to read their reaction, her movements becoming more animated as she pointed repeatedly at her pod's flashing warning lights. Vex ignored her for now, and ensured the AIs slipped deeper into the pod's systems. For a few tense moments, it sifted through the pod's unfamiliar architecture, searching for anything recognizable in the alien code. Then, finally, a connection. Clunky by its standards, but functional. Two things stood out immediately. Oxygen levels were critical, and the nav system kept repeating a set of coordinates. A beacon, most likely something meant to lead someone back. "We don't have time to take her anywhere before the oxygen runs out," Vex said, his amber eyes fixed on the rapidly declining life support readings. "Even at max velocity, the nearest research facility is hours away. We have to act now, Professor." Var's feathers rustled with uncertainty, but after a moment of internal struggle, his posture straightened with resolve.
"Open the hatch,"
he commanded, his worn beak moving decisively with each word.
"We can't waste any more time on deliberation."
"But, Professor," Vex's feather ears moved in confusion, "just moments ago you were against this due to our lack of atmospheric data. What changed your mind so suddenly?"
"The stories,"
Var replied, his gold-rimmed eyes rotating to focus on the child.
"All those fictional accounts we've studied, they consistently described humans breathing similar atmospheric compositions to our own. If they're real, as we've now proven, then those atmospheric requirements should be accurate as well."
Without further hesitation, Vex moved to the pod's hatch controls. When the external release mechanism failed to respond, he didn't even pause to consider alternatives. He simply reached for the plasma cutter stored in the emergency toolkit. Before activating it, he caught the girl's eye through the viewport and gave what he hoped was a reassuring wave, trying to convey through gesture alone that everything would be all right. The plasma cutter made quick work of the pod's seal, and with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure, the hatch swung free. The human child hesitated for just a moment before cautiously poking her head through the opening, her eyes wide, but remarkably steady as she took in her feathered rescuers. Var and Vex drew closer together, their feathers trembling slightly as they beheld what had only existed in stories until now. The child appeared to be female, perhaps 8 or 9 years old by human standards. Her skin was pale, likely from extended time in the pod, and her dark hair hung in 2 simple braids. She wore what seemed to be some kind of standardized clothing, a gray jumpsuit with patches they couldn't read. What struck them most was how her expressions seemed both alien and familiar at once, her face showing a complex mix of fear, curiosity, and relief that transcended species barriers. "Ship, begin linguistic analysis," Vex commanded, his amber eyes fixed intently on their discovery. "Search for pattern matches in the pod's computer systems and attempt to establish a basic translation matrix."
"Belay that,"
Var interrupted, his worn beak clicking with sudden inspiration.
"We already have an extensive database of human language from the fiction records. If humans are real, then their documented languages must be as well. Ship, compile all known examples of human writing from the museum's mythology archives and cross-reference them with any text found in the pod's systems."
The ship's processors warmed with increased activity, and within moments, success flashed across their screens. Vex quickly grabbed a datapad, his feathers practically vibrating with excitement as he held it up for the girl to see. In clear, carefully rendered letters, it displayed,
"Don't be afraid."
"We mean no harm." The girl's eyes widened at the sight of familiar text, and she darted back into the pod with unexpected agility. She emerged moments later clutching what appeared to be her own data device, her fingers moving quickly across its surface. When she held it up, their ship's translation function processed the characters. "Want to go home?"
"We can't,"
Var said immediately, his worn beak clicking rapidly.
"Our mandate is sample verification only. This isn't some simple artifact we can transport at will. This is a living being."
"But, Professor," Vex started, his feathers bristling.
Are you suggesting we make first contact with those fictional beings? The adult ones?
Var continued, pacing the small space.
If we consider what we learned from fiction alone, their species must be very dangerous.
She's a child, Vex said softly, watching as the girl hugged her datapad close to her chest.
A child of a species that until an hour ago we thought was purely fictional.
Var's facial disc feathers splayed wide with agitation.
We have no understanding of their biology, their reaction to first contact, their
ability to survive alone in space? Vex interrupted, his amber eyes fixed steadily on his mentor. Because we've already seen that, and she would be dead without us. We can't just put her back in that thing and abandon her. The girl looked between them, clearly sensing the tension despite the language barrier. She typed something new into her device. Please. Family waiting. Var's feathers dropped slightly.
Family,
he muttered.
Did her family survive the battle?
We have no way to know that unless we take her back. The coordinates are already in her pod's systems, Vex pressed gently. We wouldn't be sailing blind.
The museum board would never approve.
Then we don't ask them. Vex's feather ears stiffened with determination. Professor, we've already shattered every preconception about human existence. What's one more protocol? Var stood silent for a long moment, his gold-rimmed eyes studying the child. Finally, his beak moved in what might have been the ghost of a smile.
Protocols to those coordinates, he said quietly. We can justify that deviation as further collection of proof of human existence.
Vex extended his feathered hand toward the girl, who after a moment's hesitation took it with remarkable trust. He guided her to one of the bridge seats as Var initiated the hyperspace sequence, their small research vessel vibrating with building energy before making the jump. When they arrived at the coordinates hours later, both researchers froze at the sight before them. The human vessel was colossal, easily 20 times the size of their ship, its dark hull dotted with lights and what appeared to be weapon ports. The design was completely alien to them, yet somehow familiar from all those fictional accounts they'd studied.
Rather intimidating for a fictional species,
Var muttered, his worn beak clicking nervously. Yet beside them, the girl had practically pressed herself against the viewport, her face lighting up with what was unmistakably recognition and relief. Their communication system crackled to life with an incoming transmission.
This is UNSS Harbinger,
came the message in clear, confident human speech.
Identify yourselves and state your purpose.
How are they speaking to us directly? Vex wondered aloud, his feathers bristling with confusion. No first contact hurdles, no cultural exchange protocols. They're acting like an established spacefaring civilization.
We are researchers from the Museum of Extinct Civilizations,
Var responded formally through their ship's comm systems.
We wish to establish peaceful contact and
state your purpose, the human voice interrupted, firmer this time. Vex leaned forward toward the comm. We found one of your escape pods. There's a child. The transmission cut off abruptly. For several tense moments, nothing happened. Then, without warning, the ship's massive bow began to split apart, revealing a cavernous opening that glowed with intense light. Professor? Vex's amber eyes widened as their small vessel began to move, caught in some kind of gravitational field. They're pulling us in!
Ship, full reverse thrusters,
Var commanded, his facial disc feathers fully extended in alarm. But their engines, though straining at maximum power, couldn't break free from the inexorable pull. The girl touched Vex's arm gently, pointing to her datapad where she'd written, Okay, safe. But her reassurance did little to calm the researchers as their vessel was drawn deeper into the ship's massive maw.
Ship, status report,
Var called out, his golden-rimmed eyes rotating frantically to track their surroundings as they were engulfed by the larger vessel's docking bay. External pressure is increasing, the ship responded calmly. Hull integrity at 97% and holding. Detecting atmosphere composition changes in surrounding space. Warning. External mechanical systems engaging with our hull. They watched helplessly as massive mechanical arms emerged from the docking bay walls, moving toward their ship with accurate movements. The enormity of their situation struck them both. They were completely at the mercy of a species whose existence they denied until hours ago.
Perhaps,
Vex said quietly, his feather ears twitching nervously.
We should have requested permission from the museum board after all.
The hatch hissed open, and Vex and Var tensed, expecting an armed assault. Instead, a single human entered first, completely unarmed, followed by others who carried weapons at their sides, but notably not raised. Their movements were professional, but not overtly threatening. The armed humans immediately moved toward the girl, who hesitated, her small hand still gripping Vex's feathered one. After a moment's pause, she released him and ran to them. They quickly began examining her, while others inspected the pod with interest. Only then did the unarmed man turn his full attention to the rescuers.
I never thought I'd see the day when a Tyrillian would rescue one of our missing children,
he said, his voice carrying the same artificial quality as the ship's translation matrix. His face creased into what they recognized from their studies as a smile, though seeing it in person was remarkably different from archive descriptions.
How did you find her?
Var and Vex exchanged glances, their feathers rustling. Finally, Var spoke, his worn beak moving carefully.
We found evidence that humans weren't actually fictional, as we'd been taught. We discovered her in a pod while investigating this discrepancy.
But how do you know our language?
Vex interjected, his amber eyes wide with curiosity.
How did you even know we were Tyrillians?
The human laughed, a sound that made both researchers' feathers twitch involuntarily. I'm Marcos, by the way, he said, leaning casually against a bulkhead. And that's quite a story. You see, humanity made a pact with the Council long ago and we decided to leave. All those warrior species kept challenging us, wanting to claim the title of fiercest race in the galaxy. We figured it was better to be forgotten than deal with all that BS. Vex's feather ears perked up as he suddenly understood. He turned to Var, speaking quickly.
Professor, this was an old council decision. Newer species like ours would have no way of knowing. We might be the first of the younger races to discover the truth about humans.
Var seemed to recover some of his scholarly composure, his gold-rimmed eyes focusing intently on Marcos.
The Ignians, he said. Do they know about humanity? Why are you fighting them in that remote sector of space?
Marco's expression darkened slightly, though his casual posture didn't change. Every now and then, an Ignian war chief gets it into their head to go searching for that title of fiercest species. They push far enough into unknown space, they eventually find us. He shrugged, but there was something heavy in the gesture. It never ends well for anyone involved. Trust me. Var's facial feathers twitched with hesitation before asking.
The Gauche family. Are they here?
Marcos' casual demeanor faltered for the first time. He glanced at the child, now surrounded by medical personnel, before lowering his voice. She thinks she'll find them here. We'll have to tell her eventually. Her ship was one of the first ones the Ignians hit. Only a handful of escape pods made it out. Her distress beacon must have been damaged in the attack. He paused, his jaw tightening. The surviving captains made the call to withdraw after winning the battle, fearing a follow-up strike. They had no way of knowing she was still out there. Vex and Var turned to each other, their facial discs aligned in perfect symmetry. Together they bowed their heads, their 4 eyelids closing in unison, the deepest gesture of respect their culture knew. In that moment of shared silence, the weight of the girl's story and their accidental role in it hung heavy in the air. Marcos allowed the moment to linger, understanding the gravity of their gesture, even if he didn't know its exact meaning. Then, clearing his throat softly, he said, Thank you for saving her. Listen, if you have some time, there are things we should discuss inside the ship. Things you should know. The 2 researchers exchanged one more brief look, their feathers rustling with anticipation. Var's worn beak moved first.
We would be honored.
The next morning, the specimen analysis chamber felt different. The familiar hexagonal space with its polished stone floor and titanium columns now seemed to hold secrets in its shadows. Var and Vex had returned from their encounter with humanity barely 6 hours ago, and already the weight of what they needed to do pressed upon them heavily.
I still can't quite believe you agreed with doing this,
Vex said, his amber eyes watching as the mass spectrometer array's memory banks were wiped out.
After all of our years of research, all our dedication to preserving and documenting history?
Sometimes preservation means knowing when to keep a secret,
Var responded, his worn beak moving methodically as he deleted file after file from their expedition logs. His gold-rimmed eyes rotated to watch the molecular structure scanner's database being purged of all human-related data.
What we learned yesterday.
Vex's feathers bristled at the memory.
If our discovery led others to start looking for humanity...
He left the sentence unfinished as he carefully discarded the pod's recovered fragments. Var paused in his work, his facial disc feathers arranging themselves in a pattern of deep contemplation.
Imagine if every aggressive species in the galaxy suddenly had proof that humans weren't fiction. The chaos it would cause. The wars it could start.
He turned to the final container of evidence.
Sometimes, the truth isn't worth the cost of revealing it.
At least we know,
Vex said softly, watching as the last piece of physical evidence was destroyed.
At least we understand now why all those fictional accounts existed. They weren't myths at all, but memories the galaxy chose to forget.
His feather ears twitched as he added,
and somewhere out there, a little girl is alive because we accidentally found her.
Yes,
Var agreed, his beak clicking gently as he initiated the final deletion sequence.
Some secrets are better kept than revealed. Let humanity remain a legend. It seems that's exactly how they prefer it.
The specimen analysis chamber returned to its pristine state, no trace remaining of their extraordinary discovery. As they prepared to leave, Vex noticed his mentor's feathers arranged in what might have been a smile.
What is it, Professor?
I was just thinking,
Var said, his golden-rimmed eyes rotating thoughtfully.
All those years I spent studying fictional humans, I never imagined I'd end up helping them maintain their fiction.
He gestured to the now empty chamber.
Maybe that's the greatest discovery of all. Sometimes the most important truths are the ones we choose to protect.